not the inaugural episode anymore, peeps. It's episode 2, hopefully better than episode 2 of Star Wars. And you are incredible if you understand what I'm talking about when I say that.
That's right, I'm a geek.
So enough nerdiness for today. Nicole Reed here. Tara and I are work from home coaches. We ditched the 9-to-5 grind so that we would be able to have time to be home with our families and take care of our kids and be with our kids while we grow up. And now we teach other people how to do that too. That's why we have some unique takes for you today. Let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it. Let's show them how to rebel against the system.
Here's 6 truths about working in corporate that not many people talk about. 1. The reward for hard work is more work. Working hard only proves that you are able to handle a workload, which means you will be given an extensive workload. The more you work, the more work you'll get.
So truth number 1 is that the harder you work, the more work you get.
I think he's absolutely right. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, you do a lot of the physical labor, right? As like the bottom of the ladder as the implementer. But then as you do all that, like you move into management, like what's the next thing is management. And then the next thing is maybe CEO. Well, he's right. I mean, you might not be doing a lot of the physical work, but you're doing a lot more of the mental work as you move up the ladder. And so you're not only just managing your own work then, but you're managing the work of all of the employees that are underneath you. And then if you're the CEO, again, you're managing all of the people that are below you on top of making sure that the company is running properly and in profit and all these things. So yeah, he's dead on when he talks about that, because it is something that people don't realize. They think that they're promoting and getting paid more, which they are, but they're also taking on more responsibility, which equals more stress.
And the other part of that, I think, is that like the higher up you go, the less people there are, the more you are in direct competition with other people, and they're going to see you like that. My husband, I joke that he keeps amassing more power. And yeah, he is amassing more power, but it's not just the power that he's amassing. He does a really good job handling what he has, and he's given more and he's given more and he's given more. And so far, he hasn't been given so much that proverbial back breaks. But I've been in that position where I did such a good job that it was always more. And what I learned in corporate was do more with less.
Yeah.
Less resources, less people, less whatever, less money, less everything. And then at some point, there's only so much more you can do with less. And there seems to be a disconnect in a lot of the managers that I've seen between like what a person can handle, what a person should handle, and what managers think people should be able to do. Because realistically speaking, as a manager, I would judge people by the load I had to carry, by the load I was willing to carry or I was capable of carrying. And sometimes that judginess was at a misplaced level because I didn't have an understanding that people have different abilities to carry things, to carry loads based on everything going on in their life, or if they're neurodivergent or whatever. And so I didn't have an understanding of that. And so I tried to require more from people who weren't capable of doing more. And then I would get angry and upset and entitled because I was doing so much more than they were. And that didn't serve me well. And also I see that in managers. I see that in people that I've interacted with.
Yeah. And I feel like the more higher up you go, almost it seems like the less respect you get almost. It's kind of like they feel like they can just, oh, you have this responsibility, so we're just going to keep offloading more and more and more without compensating you for that extra effort. So yeah, he's dead on his assessment on that.
2. Longevity with a company isn't always a sign of success. Now, this depends on the industry, but I feel like once you reach that 5-year or 10-year mark, you are way more valuable to other companies than you are to your own company. If you want to get a title boost or a pay upgrade, finding another job is the quickest way to do it.
I agree with him on that one as well. I've seen so many people, give loyalty to the company that they're in. And you would think that being within a company and showing that you're loyal and showing your dedication would come with raises and praises and all of the things that that should come with. But we see all too often where, you know, the yearly raises are not in line with what a person has dedicated. On top of, and I see this so often, how companies will hire new employees for almost either the same or more than the person that has been there for 5 or 10 years, because the people that have been there for the longer period of time started at a certain wage and then got their yearly wages. And then now the new people are coming in where these particular jobs are worth more. And so the people not being appreciated for what they've brought to the table. So the fastest way for them to get a promotion or to get a raise is to go then be the new person and be paid for their expertise and their experience that they brought to another company, which really does seem backwards, but that is really the way things have gone. I'm sure you've seen it too. But like we've seen, especially in the era of the pandemic, we have seen so many people like share memes or things like that where, you know, it'll say like, you're offering all these bonuses to get like workers to come. Why not offer bonuses to the people who stayed? You know, it's always to the people that are new instead of giving it to the people who actually were dedicated. So yeah, I'm in agreement on that one.
So I have a friend whose boss actually has given them plenty of raises. They want to continue to work for reasons unbeknownst to me. And their boss actually did give some of their employees bonuses for staying on during the pandemic, during everything. And then the hope was that they would not quit for at least a year. What I've also seen is every position has a certain amount of money that they are deemed it is worth by only the Lord God knows who decides that. And so there's like a minimum that a position needs to get paid, and then there's like a maximum. And I've seen people hit that cap and be laid off, downsized, whatever you want to call it, only to be replaced by younger people who are in the lower range of that particular pay scale.
Completely replaceable.
And it's funny because so I'm technically a millennial, and I keep hearing
millennials don't have any sort of loyalty to jobs. When I was a young kid, I stayed for 30 years and I retired from the same company.
There's a reason that you retired from that same company, and that's because your wage kept going up. But clearly that's not the case for millennials anymore. And this guy has it pegged that we were the ones to figure out,
oh, wait, our loyalty doesn't mean anything. When we hit the cap of what we're going to be paid, our loyalty doesn't mean anything. And if I want to raise, the fastest way to do that is to go somewhere else that I think I will be appreciated more and take my experience that I've earned, learned, and grown at this company and put it to work for somebody else.
I currently write notes for a podcast that is on the cellular technology industry. And I think it's interesting because it seems like the major tech companies who do cell phone stuff, their CEOs, CFOs, they keep kind of like rotating a lot of times. They're really like rotating through the different companies. And I thought that is so weird. Why would you not want someone fresh? Why would you not want something different? And now I'm wondering if it is because they've realized that after about 5 years, they need to go to a different place that they've either been at before or a company they haven't been to before and get a raise and make money there. I can't say for sure, but I think it's a really interesting and sadly accurate experience of a lot of people.
It is, but it goes back to now, this is also why entrepreneurship and freelancing and things like that are growing at such a huge level, because some people realize that they are more valuable than what any employer is going to value them as. And so, you know, when this guy talks about the fact that like loyalty isn't what it used to be, you need to move around to give yourself a raise. And I think people are starting to realize that regardless of what companies you move to, The only person that's going to care about where you are in life, where you are achieving your capabilities, is going to be with you. And so I think that is also something that people are obviously starting to see more and more as well, which is, unfortunately, corporate America thinks that they are doing themselves a favor, but they're really doing themselves a disservice, because they're driving employees who would probably stick around for a long time. They're driving them out. Case in point, we have somebody in our world that came into our program who had been with her employer for 10 years, and she was kind of backed into a corner with like having to come back into the office. She didn't want to, now that she got this taste of being at home. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, they're not appreciating her for who she is and what she does. So now she's stepping out into entrepreneurship, and she's starting to realize, like, hey, I can do what I want. I can make what I want. I can do all these things. And so the days of corporate, I think, are, they're kind of going into a demise situation. They're kind of self-imploding a little bit with the new technologies of today.
I would like to share this article that I came across recently, because I think it's really interesting to take a look at this. Employees are afraid they'll be fired first in layoffs if they're working remotely. They could be right. Workers worry that remote employees will be let go first if layoffs come, as bosses hold on to the narrative that those who work from home don't work as hard. So for months, bosses have all but gone door to door preaching the good word of returning to the office. It was the only way, they said, to ease inflation and for workers to protect themselves from looming layoffs. While more workers are back in the office than ever since the pandemic started, companies have struggled to drag all of them to their desks. Not even the lure of lunch boxes and pizza parties wrangled them in. But the power dynamic could hit a head if the recession we've been worrying about comes to be. 78% of American workers fear that remote employees will be at risk of losing their jobs during a recession that leads to layoffs than the folks who've returned to the office full time, according to the employment background check company Good Hire's second annual State of Remote Work report. I find it funny that there is a State of Remote Work report. It's only second annual, as if it didn't exist before 2020. Whether there's any real reason to fear is unclear at this point, but the contention between employers and the workers holding on to working from home has led to threats of firing or moving remote workers' names to the top of the list if layoffs become a reality. After surveying roughly 3,500 Americans over the age of 25, the Good Hire report found that the number of people who prefer to work from home dropped to 44% from 68% last year. That said, 89% of those people who were surveyed believe that most of their colleagues still wanted to work from home. There is a disconnect. How can it be that the majority thinks most of their peers want to work from home, yet there are increasing worries that those remote workers will be first on the chopping block come layoff time? It likely stems from proximity bias in the workplace, in which bosses tend to give workers who are in their line of vision more regularly preferential treatment. According to the survey, 68% of American workers are concerned their manager views full-time office workers as more productive and higher performers in general than full-time remote workers, even though research shows the opposite is true. A recent report from Microsoft found that productivity might actually be higher than it was before the pandemic. That's incredible. It's not even the case that most people long to work remotely all the time forever. A staunch dichotomy in the remote work versus in-person work has been created and cultivated, and the outcome, whatever that may be, is striking fear into the workforce. The report serves as a wake-up call for employers who offer hybrid in-person and remote work models. A battle between in-office and remote workers is here. How will you structure your organization's work-from-home policies and compensation strategies to quell fears and keep employees engaged and satisfied? Good Hire wrote in a news release announcing the survey. Even as a recession incessantly stalks America like it's Halloween 13, and workers seem to be losing their edge over employers, remote work, even if it's part-time, is still a rather fervent sticking point. More than 60% of workers surveyed by Good Hire said they felt companies would have a hard time attracting talent if they did not offer remote work. And 33% said they would straight up quit or start a remote job search, ding, 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 if they were forced to return to the office full time. 33%. And then that's the end of the article. And I just like, I thought those numbers were staggering.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So something some people don't know is when I quit my job in 2001, my employer asked me to stay on if I could work from home. And I said, yes. So I did that for several years. And I remember when I came in at one point asking for a raise, and they denied my raise at the time because I had the benefit of working from home. And they somehow thought that because I got the benefit of working from home, that that didn't equal the fact that I was still performing the work. And in fact, back then, so this was in 2006, 2007, I remember specifically having the conversation with my boss about how wrong she was in that assessment, because when I would be in the office, it was very common where coworkers were constantly talking amongst each other, or you would have to get up and cover someone else while they were taking a break or a lunch break, or you would have the constant phones that you would have to answer, or the just constant interruptions. And I mean, I told my boss at that time, I'm like, if you look at my work log, you're going to see that I was pumping out way more work working at home where I wasn't interrupted like I am in the office. I was getting like double the work done at home versus in the office because of all of the constant interruptions and the parties and the potlucks and all of the things that happen in an office environment, right? Like it was just constant interruptions. And so I totally believe, 100% believe that productivity is up, because you have something to prove. When you are at home, you have to prove that you're doing the work, especially if the employers don't have you on video micromanaging you, which we know that some employers do. And so when you are left to your own graces, you have to prove that you're doing the work. Well, the only way that you can prove you're doing the work is by upping your productivity. I mean, there's no other way around it. And of course, because we know that even now in today's society with the pandemic, I mean, they have video cameras on them. The reason that they want them back in the office is because they want butts in the seat. They don't care if you're less productive. They want to own your time. They want to own the people that they are paying for, because they're paying for your time, not necessarily the value that you're providing. They're paying for your time. And so as long as you have a butt in the seat, that's all they care about. And it's proven by this kind of study where they're worried about like, oh, the people that are working remote are going to be at the list of the layoffs if they won't come into the office. Well, that just proves to you that they're more worried about buying your time and owning you than they are about the productivity and the overall benefit of the company. And when you see those statistics, like it doesn't surprise me based on the view that my boss had back in the early 2000s compared to now. But it is really surprising that because now the environment has changed, where so many people are working from home, and there are so many companies now that are offering remote work, that would actually even be a thing, especially in the day and age of worker shortage. Because if they're already having a hard time hiring people, what are you thinking if you're going to go and fire the people that are working remote? Because we're living in a new age. Like we're living in post-pandemic era where people know now that they like to be at home, that they like cutting out the commute, that they like to be home for their lunch hour and can get things done in their lunch hour. They know that they aren't having to deal with the anxiety and the interruptions of their coworkers. Like we're in a completely different world now, where I don't think that employers can walk it back. Like I don't think they can. Now that people have seen that they can do their job in the comfort of their own home, employers can't walk that back. And they're going to, if they try to push firing people because they're working remotely, as this article said, people are just going to quit. Like, go for it. I'll quit and find someone that will hire me to work from home, because there's thousands of companies that are doing it, including multiple corporations that people are familiar with, like Facebook and Target and Google, and like all of these places are hiring for people to work from home. And so I just don't see that employers who are going to enforce this are going to have a leg to stand on.
The overall gist of it, I think there is a level of jealousy that plays into this.
Yeah.
A level of,
Well, I have to go to work. You don't have to come into work. I wish I could just stay home and play with my kids or do whatever it is, but I don't get to do that.
and so I wonder if there isn't a level of jealousy playing into these bosses. And I don't necessarily even mean like conscious jealousy. I mean like a subconscious jealousy that makes them, maybe it plays into that, peripheral bias or whatever that they talked about. But I think it's interesting that up to a third, because 3,500 people isn't really a huge survey sample. If a third of those people, if that ends up correlating out to the rest of the United States, then if companies are starting to eliminate remote workers, or they are starting to eliminate remote positions, like our friend that we talked about earlier, then up to 33% of the American workforce is ready to up and quit. Like, sayonara, suckers, I'm going to find something better. And I really, really hope that a good portion of those people come to recognize that working a remote job is like the gateway drug to an entrepreneurial lifestyle,
Yeah.
because you get to do more of your own time, your own freedom. You get to see what skills are really important to your job versus just spending your time. Like, I remember several of my jobs that I've had were like you had to sit there and wait, and you were paid for your time to sit there, whether there were customers coming in or not. And I think there's something to be said for customer service positions where you are required to be there, like maybe at a bank. But I've also seen even remote work as far as a bank goes. With the right technology, you can even make banking a remote job. And so I hope that these people will start to consider, like, now that they've had a taste of freedom, what if I had more time? What if I had more flexibility? What if I had more just downtime to be with the people that I love, to create the life that I enjoy, to really enjoy more of my life? Particularly, I think about, people who live in large cities who have an hour commute one way, 2-hour commute one way, and they're spending an hour to 1 to 4 hours every single day in their car. And while that's great for the growth of podcasting, I don't think that's great for the long-term stability of families and emotional and mental health of the people who are being forced to do that commute every day. And so I hope that this will translate into more people questioning the 9 to 5 system that they are participating in. And I hope this leads to them saying, I wonder if I can do something different.
Yeah, we see a lot of people kind of come into our world that are like, I want to work, but like I want to work when I want to work. I want to work on my own schedule. And we see that a lot. And of course, in the job world, that's almost impossible because they're gauging you by a clock. They want to make sure that they are getting what they're paying for, versus like what we teach people to do, which is the opposite, that you actually can work when you want and when your kids are sleeping, and you can go live life and then come back and work. And that's something that I do see. One of the reasons, again, I've said this on a different recording, why I believe there is a worker shortage is because all of those people that were forced to be home, all of those people that were forced out of a job, had the ability to now take time to learn how they could get out of a job and how they could work when they wanted and how they wanted. And so we're seeing that sharp increase in entrepreneurship because of that. So people have found a way to work differently, which is kind of our mantra, right? To be able to learn to work differently so that you can live differently. And I think lots and lots of people are recognizing that. And I think honestly, right now in 2022 and moving forward, companies are going to be competing with entrepreneurship. It's not the comfy, cozy thing that it once was before. Now that people are realizing that they can tap into the world through the internet, and it's just not the same. And so I think employers need to really take a step back and understand that they don't necessarily have the upper hand anymore. And they need to start changing the way that they look at appreciating employees as actual human beings that provide value over somebody that's just a butt in a seat, because more and more people are realizing that they can walk away. And so they're going to have to start stepping up to the plate to offer them something different.
So on the heels of that, can work from home be the new normal?
Oh, I think it is becoming the new normal. We're seeing on-demand doctors, we're seeing nurses working from home, doing triage calls. I mean, we're seeing people that read x-rays, we're seeing them working from home. I think it's a whole different dynamic now, because the thing of it is that through the pandemic, people had to get creative. How can we continue to run our business when the governors have now shut down our type of business, right? Like, they had to get creative. And so now that they got creative, now that they realize that they actually can run their business from anywhere, I think it is becoming the new normal. And especially if that study is right, that people are more productive post-pandemic than they were pre-pandemic, I think the employers need to lean into that and understand that people operate better in their own environments. Now, there's always going to be those people who prefer to be at work, who prefer to separate the two. I mean, there are people out there that just that hated working from home, that don't want to be home, and that's fine, right? But there are the people who do want to be home, and that's becoming more and more. I mean, how many people did we see kind of come into our world that specifically said, like, oh, I never thought that I would like working from home, but like now that I've been there, like I realize I can do my laundry on my lunch break, and I can throw dinner into the crock pot, and I can like do all these things, and I'm not commuting. So like I can walk out of my bedroom and sit at my desk, and I don't have a 30-minute commute there and back. They're realizing how much of their time they got back. And so I do think that remote work in general for employers is going to be the new normal, but even more so people stepping into entrepreneurship because of the pandemic, placing them at home and realizing how nice it was to not have to leave their house, to not have to be part of that rat race. And so I definitely see this transition becoming a more and more of a thing. That is why I truly believe the service industry, namely restaurants, are suffering right now, because whether it's people that discovered entrepreneurship or whether it's people that discovered that they could sit on their couch or at their desk and work at home, is far above and beyond better doing that than having to go to work and work, and in some states, people are only working for tip money, with a very, very low minimum wage. And so I think that it also depends on the industry, but yeah, I mean, I just foresee that it's only going to increase.
Hey, so they want us to talk about quiet quitting. Quiet quitting, what's quiet quitting? So quiet quitting is when you go to work, but you don't put any extra effort in, you don't go above and beyond, and you don't take on additional assignments. Isn't that just like doing your job? No, it is totally different. It's like you're just doing the bare minimum and you don't even care about getting promoted, so you don't do extra work during the nights or weekends. Okay, well, I've been quiet quitting for like 6 months, and it must have been really quiet because nobody seems to have noticed. Wait, am I quiet quitting?
It's interesting. I had never heard this this concept until I think it was literally like made up in the last 30 days, because I've been seeing it now everywhere. I think basically, it's interesting because how he explained it was saying like, oh, you don't do anything extra or above and beyond. If you aren't being appreciated at your job, you're not being given raises, you aren't, being appreciated. They are constantly wanting you to focus on your weaknesses and like, always criticizing. I mean, what would incentivize somebody to want to do above and beyond if you aren't being recognized or compensated for it? And I think that is something that so many people are coming into today with corporate America and with jobs in general, because especially now, like we see so many companies saying that they're short staffed, you've got people who are coming in and they're covering two positions and they're working like a dog and they're not being paid double for doing double the work. So I think this is something. I don't think that quiet quitting is new. I like how they've given a name to it, because definitely I think that there's a lot of people who are sitting in that realm right now where like they know like this is no longer for them and they want something different, which I think we're seeing a lot of those quiet quitters coming into our world. In fact, we just were speaking with somebody this week that came into our program who said she had already cleaned out her desk. Like she hasn't quit yet, but she's taken all her stuff home. Like she's already made that decision that she's got one foot out the door. And I think that a lot of people are there. So many people are putting in so much effort and they're not being compensated for it.
Bingo. They're not compensated for it. They're not appreciated for it. They're not like people feel appreciated in different ways. My friend had a meeting with his boss, and his boss is typically, he's not overly praising. He's kind of hard to please. He has very high expectations, very high standards. And my friend has fought has really stood up to him and really come into his own through interactions with him. And at the end of their meeting recently, this boss stuck out his hand and shook my friend's hand. And I said, what? That's not typical. Like to greet someone like you haven't seen them for a while, like, okay, shake hands. Maybe I've just been out of corporate world too long, but this seemed like abnormal. And like my friend was super excited at this little teeny tiny thing that signified that his boss appreciates him and respects him and sees him more as a colleague than a subordinate. It's things like that people are missing. It's more work with less, more work with less, more work with less. And I think it's also people starting to see that there are other opportunities. You can take skills that you already have and build a business from it. You don't have to necessarily go get a whole huge education. Entrepreneurship is for everybody. If you have the tenacity, if you have the perseverance, if you have the support in the community, if you have the roadmap, even, you can be a successful entrepreneur and you can save yourself the headaches and the stress and the frustration and the striving, I think that comes with a corporate environment. And I think that's what our mission, Tara, is to open people's eyes to the fact that they are chained to a desk with golden handcuffs. Why are you going to question and think about going out on your own when this job gives you benefits, when this job gives you health insurance and life insurance and dental insurance and all these things that you don't have to worry about, except when you have to pick a plan every year and hope that you're going to be covered and all that good stuff? Why would you ever question if you could do something better or get something better when you have those golden handcuffs around your wrists?
Well, I think in the case of this with the quiet quitting, like I think the way that I view it is that I look at entrepreneurship as growth, right? Like we're always growing, we're always bettering ourselves. You jump into the personal development. If you're quiet quitting on your employer, that basically means that, I mean, yes, okay, you're not putting in any extra effort because you're not being compensated for it, but you're also then stifling yourself. You're stifling your creativity, your opportunity, your ability to grow, because you have just basically put a dead stop on doing anything extra. So, okay, well, if you do that, sure, you're kind of sticking it to the man by not, going above and beyond. But at the same time, you're really kind of screwing yourself over in a way, because you're just existing and you're not growing. I think for me, if I know I wasn't going to leave, I would just be like, okay, I'm here anyway. So like, I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to go and learn maybe from a different colleague something so that I can move my way up that ladder, right? Like if you're not going to quit anyway, why not take that opportunity? But for those that are like, okay, I'm going to have one foot out the door, then it's like, okay, well, start looking for those opportunities to move and to grow, because the minute you stop growing, like I think that that's setting yourself up for a whole world of other problems, because we need to be growing as humans. And so if you're just going to be sitting at your desk with the golden handcuffs without any sort of growth in mind, I think you're just going to feel more and more and more resentful and more and more and more stifled as you're sitting there every single day showing up to work. And eventually you're going to be one of those people who is just literally going through the motions of life with nothing to look forward to. And so I think we all have to be owners of our life the way that we're moving forward. And I think that quiet quitting your job is almost kind of quiet quitting on yourself as well. So I think that a person has to tread a little bit carefully on that and be careful about how they're doing that and what their plan is to move out of it.
So Tara, something that we talk about a lot through our channel, through our different mediums of communication, our blog, etc., is freelancing. What does freelancing mean?
So freelancing is taking skills that you already have, maybe skills that you have gotten from a prior job, coursework, whether in college or high school, innate talent, skills, passions, whatever those are, taking those and monetizing those skills. Basically, solving a problem for somebody else. That's really what it ultimately is. When you can come in and you can solve a problem for somebody, namely a small business. We prefer to work with small businesses, right? Because those are the people who aren't necessarily in a position to hire an employee or have that ability to provide that much work for a 20, 30, 40 hour a week employee. You're solving a problem for them that can't be solved otherwise. And that is something that, of course, is growing more and more and more, because people are realizing it's so much more beneficial and cost efficient to work with somebody that specializes in a certain thing. You come in and do that one thing instead of trying to find somebody that can fulfill 20 different tasks. It's easier to just try to find the people that specialize in those particular things. So we're seeing that to be a growing industry where people can tap into that.
Are freelancers self-employed?
Freelancers are self-employed, which come with a lot of perks like tax deductions and all sorts of fun stuff. In fact, we just did a training on this with people in our world, where basically we were talking about how employees, obviously they have their gross income and then they get all of their taxes taken out, and then they have to cover all of their expenses with what's left over. With being a freelancer or a business owner, you actually get to take all of your expenses, take them off the top, and then your profit is what's left over, and that's what you get taxed on. We see people talk about like 1099 contracting as the same as like an employee or a job, where we know that those are two completely different things. Like when you're freelancing, you aren't applying for jobs, right? Like you are fulfilling contracts and things like that. So you're definitely self-employed as a freelancer. You're not an employee. But sometimes I see people interchangeably use those terms, and a person has to be careful how they get caught up in that terminology.
Is it possible to work from home with a baby or kids?
Oh, of course. I wouldn't. So we see a lot of people comment on that working from home isn't a substitute for daycare. Now, that might be the case for some employers where, because again, they want to micromanage you and they want to make sure that they're getting every penny of the time that they're paying for. But as a freelancer or business owner, you absolutely can work alongside your kids. And in fact, I think it's a really great skill to let your kids see you performing and doing. So as far as a baby goes, like, yeah, I mean, I used to baby wear, and so they would be right on my lap while I was working, or, you know, obviously when I'm doing my own thing, like I can stand up and work. You can take breaks, you can do whatever you want as long as you're working on your own and you don't have anybody else dictating your schedule or what that looks like. So oftentimes I would be working during nap time, bedtime. When my husband would be home, I'd take off into the office, whatever. One thing that bothers me the most is I see when somebody says, hey, I'm like trying to find an opportunity where I can work from home with my kids, and people immediately jump to that, like, oh, working from home isn't a substitute. But it is if you look for the right thing, right? Which of course you and I push freelancing and business ownership, but there are some employers out there who will accommodate that, especially if they're family oriented businesses. So it just irks me, you know, that this is one of the biggest pet peeves that I have, is where people are just jump right to that, as if you somehow, for the people that are dedicated, somehow can't figure it out. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about that subject, but I won't. But that is definitely something that I'm super passionate about, because I've worked at home alongside my 8 kids. If I can do that, anybody can do it.
I would say it's probably a lot easier to work around your kids from home if you are a freelancer, if that's the type of work that you have, if that's the kind of working from home that you're doing. I think that's a lot easier to do than it is if you have a job where you are tethered to their timetable. If your work from home job, it requires you to have your camera on for the whole day, for instance, to be logging in and out whenever you're working or not working, like that could get really burdensome and cumbersome. I think
Be really annoying
to have to track your time that way. And so I think that the way that we do it is a lot easier, a job by design, a work by design around your life, instead of arranging your life around your work. And I think that has actually appealed to a lot of people in our world, because it's true, because it's empowering, because you feel like a whole person, not just a number that is going to be replaced as soon as you can't do your job anymore. If you get injured, you can't do your job, you can be replaced. If you have a baby, can't do your job, you can be replaced. If you die, like we all will, you can't do your job anymore, you're going to be easily replaced. And I like the idea of doing something that is different and that I can do when I need or want to, that I enjoy, and that I'm not just a bunch of randomly thrown together responsibilities that don't really match like jobs tend to be.
So one of the things that I think is a disservice to parents, of course, is when you're going to work and you're miserable in your job and you're not appreciated and you're unhappy, and then you come home and you're dealing with your kids. And when I was in my 9 to 5, I felt like I got the worst of my kids, because it was always, you know, they were at daycare all day, they were tired, I was at work all day, I was tired. And then you never got to fully enjoy your kids, which is the whole reason that you had them to begin with. And so that's really one of the things that bothers me about that whole narrative. And then I see people say, oh, well, you know, it's not fair to your job if you have your kids at home with you, and it's not fair to your kids if, you know, you're concentrating on your work all the time. And I thought, you know, that it's so ridiculous, that argument. And, you know, I have said over and over and over again, like, and I'm going to say it again here for the people that are listening. I don't care where you work. You are not giving 100% to your job all the time anyway, because again, you have coworkers interrupting you. You have boss interrupting you. You have meetings that could have been emails. Like, you have all of these things that are going into your job that people don't take into consideration. Well, if you can have coworkers interrupting you constantly and talking about the weekend that they had and all of the irrelevant information that you don't need to know, then your kids can be interrupting you while you're at home, while you're getting them a snack or whatever the case may be. And then the same goes if your kids were going to school or your kids are going to daycare, they're not getting 100% of their provider's time or their teacher's time because they are 100%, part of 30 students that are in the room or 10 kids that are in the room or whatever environment that they're in. They're not the only one getting 100% of that attention because all these other kids need attention too. And while you can sit there and say, oh, well, then they at least get to play with other kids. Well, not all kids want to play with other kids. Like some kids have anxiety. Some kids have reasons that they don't want to be in an environment outside of their home. And kids are safe at home. That's the way it has been for centuries. Like it's only been in the last several decades where daycare and school became a thing. And so to sit there and say that your kids must be socialized and your kids must be away from their parents for 9 hours a day is an absolute ridiculous argument. Anybody that wants to talk to me about that, and you know this, Nicole, I will argue them under the bus. I will die on this hill over this argument.